Today, in our first meeting together, we'll speak about the method of getting into Buddhism. For the sake of simplicity, speed, and efficiency in coming to terms with Buddhism, we'd like you to begin by knowing 3 words. The first word is Rokru. We could say comprehensive knowledge or complete knowing. The second is to be awake, to be wide awake, fully awake. The third is Bhikkhu, which is like to blossom, like a flower blossoming in freshness, purity, clarity. So please know these 3 words. Comprehensive knowing, to be fully awake, and to blossom. Comprehensive knowing here does not mean knowing everything. It means merely to know the things we need to know. So it's to know comprehensively everything that is necessary for us to know. It really isn't necessary for us to know about all the matters of outer space or the inner workings of the atom of nucleus. There are many things that aren't really necessary for us to know. But there are things that, if we know them, they will lead to the direct and complete end of suffering, of pain. These are the things that it is necessary for us to know. As for the word to be fully awake, to wake up, this doesn't mean so much to physically be awake, but it's when the mind wakes up from the sleep of the human defilements of greed, anger, and delusion. To wake up from these is what we mean here by waking up. To be asleep, to be lost in greed, anger, in delusion, is to be lost in darkness. And to wake up from that is the second thing we're talking about. So if there is knowing and there is waking up, then there will be a blossoming like a flower blossoms. But this will be a blossoming that will not wilt. Ordinary flowers blossom and then wilt and rot. But this blossoming, because it comes from knowing and from waking up from the defilements, this blossoming into freshness and clarity doesn't wilt. So now we come to what we call Buddhadasa or Buddhism. First of all, we'd like to say that Buddhism will not harm or interfere with your intellectual or cultural freedom. You all are free to think and believe and hold opinions as you see fit, depending on your cultural, educational, or religious background. This intellectual freedom is not tampered with by Buddhism. So there is no need to stop being a Christian, a Muslim, or whatever. Buddhism can still provide something of value, because the methods of Buddhism have nothing to do with interfering with our freedom of thought, belief, and expression. Instead, Buddhism has something to add, some methods or points of view or ways of observation which will help us to find the way to free our lives from suffering, to eliminate, to quench suffering in our lives. Or we can say will help us to eliminate problems from our lives. So you can see that in Buddhism there is no dogmatic system. Buddhism doesn't force you to believe anything, to study or practice. Buddhism does not require any belief in any system of dogma. Rather, Buddhism encourages you to think for yourself, study for yourself, investigate things on your own. And when you come across things that you think will be able to quench suffering, to get rid of pain and sorrow, then go ahead and experiment, try those things out. And only when you know directly through your own experience, through your own living, that something will eliminate suffering, only then need you believe it. You need not rely on any system of dogma. Sometimes we have difficulties with the words we use. And so there are often people asking, is this Buddhism a religion or not? So it comes down to how we look at and how we use these words. And if we understand the word religion in a profound way, then we will see also that Buddhism is a religion. So we ask you to consider the following meaning or definition of religion. This is the one that seems most appropriate to us. Religion is the practices or the system of practices that enable mankind to realize the highest thing, the practices which lead humanity to the highest thing. To us, this is the correct and clearest definition of religion. But then there's a lot of wondering about this thing called the highest thing. In religions that believe in God or some form or kind of God, they will hold that God is the highest thing. In Buddhism, however, we do not say that God is the highest thing. Rather, we say that Nibbana is the highest, the supreme thing. Nibbana is this state where all suffering is completely quenched, completely ended, where the state in which all problems are dropped, are eliminated. This complete ending of suffering, of misery, is what we call Nibbana. Now, if you would like to talk about God in relation to Buddhism, then you would have to do it in terms of Nibbana, which would mean it's a non-personal God. Nibbana has nothing to do with a person, with some individual-like thing. But if we wish to call it a non-personal God, we could do so. This, in Buddhism, is the highest thing, the supreme thing. Buddhism is a way of practice that enables us to reach, to realize this highest thing. Now, if you prefer, even if you prefer to continue to use the word God, God in the name Yahweh, or God in the name of Allah, or whichever name God has, we suggest that you understand this name with the meaning of that which helps us to salvation, that which helps us to be saved, the thing that will really help us to be saved from all pain, all misery, all suffering, all dukkha. This is the meaning we suggest for you. And if we can use this meaning, then there will be no disagreement and no conflict between us. The word nibbana as a verb means the action, the activity that completely extinguishes and eliminates suffering and misery. And then the result of that is the state, the fruit of coolness, in which there is no pain and misery. This is just as much a God as any of the other gods, because this is the highest thing, this action which helps us to be free of all misery. This is the non-personal God. But if you like, we can use all the gods, all the different names of God to help us in order to be saved from the great torment of suffering, of misery. There's no need for us to argue about God. There's no reason to turn God into an argument or something to fight about. Why not just use all the gods in order to help us to realize the highest thing, complete freedom from suffering? We can compare religions if we wish, but we should never do so in a way that leads to conflict and argument. If we study comparative religions, we should do so not to emphasize the differences, but to find the similarities, find the places where we can cooperate and work together. If we compare religions in this way, it can be a fruitful and useful activity. So we should look and see that all religions aim to eliminate selfishness from human life. That all religions, all true religions, are trying to bring peace into the world, to allow peace to flourish and spread. These are the aims of all religions. Now, different religions may use different methods, have different terminologies, different symbols, in order to bring about these aims. But this is merely as ways to try and help the many different kinds of people coming from many different cultures and backgrounds. The great variety in religion is just to answer and respond to the great variety in humans and in the needs of humans. But always, religions are trying to bring peace, to allow peace to flourish. If we can see this, then there's no need for argument. And we can use this basic essence of religion to our advantage, as we see that all religions work to eliminate suffering, to completely destroy suffering in human lives. The words being united with God, being one with God, mean the state or the condition of being completely free of suffering, of having quenched misery. This is what it means to be united with God. Whether you say God or Nibbana or whatever, whether you say this is the personal God or the non-personal God or whatever we call it, the true meaning that we're talking about is being completely free, of having eliminated pain, misery, or as we say in Pali, eliminating dukkha, having quenched dukkha. This is what it really means to be united with God, to have realized this state. When we see that all the religions are pointing to this same thing, then there's no need for conflict. When we see that all religions are pointing to this state that is free of pain, misery, in conflict, then we see that there's simply one method involved in religion, and then that one method or way is the way that gets rid of suffering. The fact that some religions, in some places, prefer to talk about a God that is personal, a God that has individual, sometimes even human characteristics. This is so because in some places and times it is that religion saw that it was not possible to talk to people about a God that was non-personal. And so when people wouldn't understand such a thing, it is necessary to speak about the highest thing in terms of a personal, individual God. But in sometimes in places, people can understand. They're ready to listen to and practice towards a non-personal God, a God completely free of any personality traits or human characteristics. Buddhism is of the later sort. When people are able to comprehend this teaching, then Buddhism will discuss the non-personal God, will point out that there is such a thing, that this is the highest, the supreme thing, and will encourage people to practice in order to reach this highest non-personal God. So let's just say that whatever will make us be above our problems, whatever enables us to be above all problems, that is God. Whether it's a non-personal or a personal God, we won't worry about. But let's just pay attention to this thing that allows us to be above our problems, to be above all pain and misery. Now let's talk about Buddhism specifically. Buddhism is able to show us or teach us a new way or a new system of life. Buddhism will give us the means to follow a new system of life. When we say this, we mean that Buddhism will allow us to live life in a way that is completely free of all positivism and negativism. It'll allow us to get out of the traps that positive thinking and negative thinking build for us. This is to be completely free, to be free of any influence of any of the power of the positive and the negative. Now, many people will not be interested by this because nowadays people are in love with the positive. They're infatuated by positivism, by positive things. And so many people will not be willing or will be uninterested in what Buddhism has to offer. But if we really are interested in freedom, in peace, and in truth, then Buddhism will help us to be free of the influences of positivism and negativism, of our minds being dominated by the positive and the negative. There's an absolute fact that anyone who is enslaved to positivism, anyone who is trapped by the positive, that person will not like Buddhism. They won't be interested in Buddhism and will be unable to understand it. Because if we're completely trapped by the positive, if our mind is thoroughly dominated by thinking about what is positive, by what we like and want, then we won't be able to appreciate or understand Buddhism, which enables us to be free of positivism and negativism. This indulgence or infatuation with positivism can be traced to our attachment to the positive. There are things that we consider to be positive, or sometimes we say good, and we like these things, we want them, we desire them. And because of this liking and desiring of positive things, we get attached to the positive. We take up a personal attitude. We get involved in them personally. We take up an egoistic stance, and this we call attachment. And through this attachment to the positive, we become trapped by it. And through this trap, we are plunged into all kinds of frustration, sorrow, and misery. Anyone who is completely satisfied, or at least thinks that they are happy with indulgence and attachment to positivism, such a person will have no chance of understanding Buddhism. Buddhism is a method that is free of the influence of positivism and negativism. It's outside of the sphere of influence of these attachments. And so Buddhism, and through correctly following, studying and practicing the principles of Buddhism, we can transcend the problem of negativism and positivism and the attaching to them. But if we're still happy about indulgence in positivism, then we will not be able to understand Buddhism as it really is. What we'll do is we'll just distort Buddhism to fit our own opinions and perspectives. But in fact, we will never even know what genuine Buddhism is, and it will be impossible that we would ever have actual, true Buddhism unless we are truly interested in freedom from the positive and the negative. If we are not interested in this freedom, then we have no chance of understanding Buddhism. As for the negative, this really isn't so much of a problem, because none of us are very interested in the negative as it is. We're all willing to do without it. So the negative or negativism isn't such a problem. But still, indirectly, it confronts us, so we will have to deal with it as well. Because negative things, negative thoughts will come in, even though we don't really want them. And so we'll have to know how to deal with them, how to be free of the negative as well. And so Buddhism will enable us to be free both of the positive and also the negative. And it will help us to arrange, to manage in our lives so that we can live our lives in a truly free and peaceful way, unharmed and uninfluenced by positivism and negativism. Or to make it a little easier to understand, we can talk about another pair of words, the words good and evil, or good and bad. The meaning of good and evil is basically the same as positivism and negativism. This good, our pursuit of the good, dominates our lives. We're always wanting something good, liking something good, chasing after something good. We hunger for the good and then suffer frustration or disappointment when we don't get it as quick enough, or in large enough quantities, or in exactly the form we want. Our pursuit of the good, our fixation and obsession with the good, dominates us. And of course there's always the bad. There are the bad, the evil things that come into our lives even though we don't want them. And so we're confronted with the bad. Ordinary people are going back and forth between the good and the evil all the time. Buddhism allows us to be beyond the influence of these as well, to not have to live a life that is dominated and trapped within the good and the bad, but instead to be free of these, to transcend them. Those of you who have ever studied the Bible, the Christian Bible, might be familiar with the place in the first chapter of Genesis, where God tells Adam and Eve not to attach to good and evil. Don't get involved in good and evil. It'll just bring you lots of problems. This is the message of the story about the tree of the knowledge, or the tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. There's that tree with the apples, and if you eat one of the apples, then you know about good and evil, and it brings about all kinds of problems. This is the Bible's way of warning us to not attach to good and evil. This is the basic essence of spiritual life, to be out from under this attachment so that our lives can be free. As human beings, we create our problems for ourselves, and the vast majority of these problems are created out of the good. Because of our obsession with the good, our desires and hungers for the good, we make ourselves all kinds of problems. We want the good, we're searching for it and chasing after the good. But when we get it, we're not even satisfied. We want a better good. But that isn't enough. And so we hope for, we work for, we search for the best good. But even the best good isn't enough for us. We always want more. Our desire for the good, this attachment to the good, is endless. There's no stopping it. And it just goes on and on, going around in circles, chasing after the good, the better good, and the best good. This pursuit of the good causes us so many problems. The bad, of course, has some of its problems, but it's this we volunteer, we're hungry for, we're in favor of the good, and so it causes the most problems. The same's true of positivism. Negativism doesn't cause so many problems. To be free of this is what Buddhism is about. Because of this obsession with the good, we're unable to sleep at night. We even develop nervous disorders, psychoses, can go crazy, to the point that some people kill themselves because of this obsession with the good. Or if we put it in the most simple terms, when we're very happy, when we're really happy, we're unable to sleep at night, and the food we eat doesn't taste good. Have you looked and seen this for yourself? Or when we're sad and unhappy, the food we eat doesn't taste good, and we can't sleep properly at night. This shows very clearly the influence, the result of the good and the bad, of positivism and negativism, and shows that the only place to be free and at peace is when we're no longer under the influence of good and bad, of positive and negative. Then we'll be able to sleep at night, and food will taste delicious. For example, people who kill themselves. Generally, we love ourselves more than anything else. But some of us will go and kill this life that we love the most because we've gotten too attached to some form of goodness. And then the result is suicide. Now, our way to be free is to study and investigate things. It's to study, investigate specifically goodness and evil.